The rain hammered against the windshield as Emma gripped the steering wheel, her hands trembling slightly. She was exhausted after a long day at work, the hum of the tires on the wet road almost lulling her into a daze. Her mind wandered back to the morning's conversation with her husband Jake. They had argued about something insignificant, nothing unusual for them lately. She had promised herself it wouldn't ruin the evening, but now, the fatigue seemed to weigh even heavier on her. She blinked, trying to shake off the drowsiness. The streetlights flickered as she passed them, casting eerie shadows across the darkened road. Just a few more miles, she whispered to herself. Her eyelids felt heavier, the warmth of the car's interior inviting her to relax. But the road was slippery, the rain making it hard to see, and the tiredness was starting to catch up with her. A sudden screech of tires shattered her thoughts. She gasped, slamming her foot on the brake, but it was too late. The car swerved violently, and before she could react, there was a deafening crash. Her vision blurred, the world spinning wildly before it all went black. Emma slowly opened her eyes. At first, everything was blurry, a haze of white and muted colors that swirled around her. She tried to move but felt a sharp pain in her head, causing her to wince and close her eyes again. "Where am I?" she murmured softly, her voice barely a whisper. The sterile scent of the room filled her nostrils, and the faint beeping of a heart monitor seemed oddly distant, as if it was part of a dream she couldn't quite wake up from. When she opened her eyes again, she noticed the pale walls of a hospital room. The faint hum of machines was all around her. She was lying on a bed, an IV line inserted into her arm. The room felt cold, despite the warm blanket covering her. Emma turned her head slightly, her eyes searching for something familiar. And then, she saw him. Sitting beside her, his face was partially obscured by the light, but there was no mistaking the smile on his lips. His brown hair was slightly tousled, and his eyes, those eyes, she knew those eyes, but something felt wrong. This man, this wasn't Jake, her husband. "Emma," he said softly, his voice low and comforting. "You're awake." She blinked, her heart pounding in her chest. What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling as she tried to sit up. "Where's Jake?" The man's expression shifted slightly, his brows furrowing with concern. "Jake's not here. It's me, Michael. Don't you remember?" Her head was spinning now. Michael, her lover. Her heart sank as she tried to make sense of everything. She had been so sure of her life with Jake, so certain of their relationship. But the moment she saw Michael, she realized how much she had been hiding from herself. "Michael, what happened? Why am I here?" Her voice quivered, a mix of confusion and fear. "You were in a car accident," he said gently, his hand reaching for hers. "The doctors said you were lucky to survive." His voice was calm, but there was a nervous edge to it. "I've been here, waiting with you, since they brought you in." Emma's mind raced. She remembered nothing about the accident, only the brief moment before everything went dark. And now, here was Michael, sitting by her side as if nothing was out of the ordinary. She tried to recall the last few weeks, the moments she spent with Jake, and the moments she spent with Michael. But the memories felt distant, as though they belonged to someone else. How could she have forgotten? How could she have been living this double life without even realizing it? Her chest tightened, and she took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. "Why are you here?" she asked again, her voice growing stronger with the need to understand. "Where's Jake? Why is he not here with me?" Michael seemed to hesitate, and for a moment, Emma could see the struggle in his eyes. I don't know where Jake is. I couldn't get a hold of him. I tried to call him, but he hasn't answered." Her breath caught in her throat. The confusion deepened, and she felt a chill settle over her. She had no idea what was happening or why she was stuck in this whirlwind of emotions and unanswered questions. One thing was certain, though. This wasn't supposed to be her reality. She wasn't supposed to be here with Michael. Not like this. Please just let me see him, she whispered, feeling the tears prick at her eyes. Please, I need to talk to him. Michael nodded, but he didn't move right away. He just sat there, his gaze shifting to the floor. For the first time, Emma noticed how tense his shoulders were, how uncomfortable he seemed. It made her feel uneasy. The hospital room, once so sterile and comforting, now felt like a suffocating prison. Emma's thoughts were scattered, a whirlwind of confusion and fear. She wanted to understand, to piece together what had happened, but everything felt distant and disjointed. The soft beeping of the heart monitor was the only constant sound in the room, marking the passing seconds as if they were endless. Michael, she finally said, her voice breaking the silence. Why am I with you? What happened to Jake? Why isn't he here? Her heart was racing, her mind grasping at any thread of logic, but nothing made sense. Michael's face remained calm, but his eyes were filled with an emotion Emma couldn't quite read. He sighed deeply, a long, almost exhausted breath. Emma, you don't remember, do you? His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I don't remember what, she replied urgently, feeling the tension in the room tighten like a vice. I don't remember anything, Michael. Please, tell me. He hesitated again, his gaze flickering between her and the door, as if unsure of how to proceed. He seemed like he was fighting with something inside himself, but Emma's desperation overpowered her confusion. She needed answers. She needed them now. Jake and we've been going through some things, Michael began, his voice steady, though there was a noticeable edge of discomfort. You've been distant lately, Emma. We've talked about it. And that night, when you were at that bar, He faltered, collecting his thoughts. You and She frowned, trying to piece together the fractured details of their last few months together. Bar? What was he talking about? She was with Jake, wasn't she? She didn't have any recollection of a night at a bar, or of any significant moments that would have led to this. Michael, I don't understand, she said, her voice trembling now, the weight of her confusion sinking in. Why are you here? Why are we together? Did we have an affair? Michael's eyes darkened at the question, but he didn't avoid her gaze. He nodded slowly, and Emma felt a cold shiver run down her spine. His words were slow, each one hanging heavily in the air. Yes, he said quietly. We did. It's not something either of us expected, but yes, Emma. We've been seeing each other for months now. Her head spun, and the world seemed to tilt. The room felt like it was closing in on her, the sterile white walls pressing against her chest as if they were suffocating her. Her vision blurred with the overwhelming flood of emotions. The betrayal, the confusion, the realization that the man she had trusted, the man she had called her husband, had been kept in the dark, unaware of what had been happening right under his nose. Emma opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She couldn't form a coherent thought. How could this be true? How could Michael and she have crossed this line without her even realizing it? I need to see Jake, she whispered again, this time more forcefully, her voice cracking under the weight of the realization. Please, Michael, I need to see him, now. Michael's expression softened, but there was still that underlying unease in his eyes. Emma, I don't think he's going to come, he said quietly, his voice almost apologetic. He doesn't know about the affair. And frankly, I don't think he's ready to face what's happened. Are you saying he doesn't even know I've been with you? Her voice rose in disbelief, shock evident in every syllable. The betrayal was too much for her to bear. And yet, it was the reality she had to face. No, he doesn't, Michael confirmed, his voice heavy with guilt. We were both wrong, Emma. But this was bound to come out eventually. Her heart raced, her pulse pounding in her ears. The room felt like it was spinning now, and she struggled to focus on the conversation. Every word seemed to slip through her fingers like sand. How could you do this to him? She whispered through clenched teeth, her body trembling. The flood of emotions was overwhelming. Guilt, anger, disbelief. But it was more than that. She felt like she had betrayed not only Jake but herself too. How had she allowed herself to get to this point? I never meant for things to get so complicated, Michael admitted, his voice heavy with regret. We both should have stopped long before this, but we didn't. And now I'm just trying to help you. I'm just trying to be here for you. By lying to me? Emma snapped, the frustration bubbling up inside her. By keeping me in the dark about everything? You're the one who should have stopped. You're the one who should have been honest with me. Michael's face twisted with emotion, but he didn't argue. Instead, he leaned forward, his hand reaching for hers again. But Emma pulled her hand away, the action so quick it almost startled him. I can't deal with this right now, Emma said, her voice breaking. I need to think. I need to understand what the hell is going on in my life. As she turned her face away, looking out the window at the blurry figures of passing cars, she couldn't help but feel like her life had just been ripped apart. Emma sat in silence for what felt like hours, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts she couldn't control. The soft beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound that filled the room, punctuating the stillness that had settled between her and Michael. She refused to look at him, her gaze fixed on the window where the rain continued to pour, blurring the world outside as if it were a dream she couldn't wake up from. The reality of the situation crashed over her like a tidal wave. Michael. Her lover. Her affair. She had spent months, maybe longer, living a double life, betraying her husband in ways she hadn't even realized until now. How could she not have seen it? How could she have allowed herself to become so tangled in lies? The shame was suffocating. She felt exposed, naked in front of Michael, but also in front of herself. This wasn't the woman she thought she was. She had always believed herself to be faithful, honest, someone who valued integrity above all else. Yet here she was, broken, caught in the aftermath of her own choices. A soft knock on the door broke her thoughts, and Emma jerked her head toward the sound. Her heart skipped a beat, hoping it was Jake, hoping that somehow, miraculously, he had found out about everything and had come to find her. But it wasn't Jake. A nurse stepped in, her white uniform blending into the sterile atmosphere of the room. She was holding a clipboard, her expression professional and slightly concerned. Ms. Gray, how are you feeling? She asked, her voice kind, but clinical. Emma didn't answer immediately. Her mind was still too clouded with everything Michael had said. Instead, she gave the nurse a faint nod, not trusting herself to speak. She could feel Michael's presence in the room, his eyes on her. But she didn't look at him. She couldn't. Not now. Not when everything was still unraveling in her mind. Your vitals are stable, the nurse continued, glancing at her clipboard before looking back at Emma. The doctor will be in shortly to check on you, but we just need to make sure you're comfortable. Is there anything you need? Emma shook her head, trying to keep the tears at bay. She didn't need anything. She didn't even know what she needed anymore. I need some time alone, she finally whispered, her voice small and fragile. The nurse nodded understandingly, then turned to Michael. You can stay, but please try to keep her calm. She's had a traumatic experience. Michael nodded solemnly, but Emma barely noticed. The nurse left, and the room returned to its uncomfortable quiet. She couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped, as if the walls were closing in on her. She didn't want to talk to Michael. She didn't want to think about him or what had happened. All she wanted was to escape, to be anywhere but here. Michael broke the silence after what felt like an eternity. Emma, I know you're upset. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to help you get through this, he said, his voice low and earnest. Emma turned her head slightly, but kept her eyes averted. Help me? She echoed bitterly. How are you going to help me? You've already destroyed everything. Everything I knew is gone. I don't even recognize my own life anymore." He sighed, his voice heavy with regret. "I never meant for it to end up like this. I never meant to hurt you or Jake. I got lost in it. In you. In us." Her breath hitched, the emotions rising inside her. "You got lost?" she repeated, incredulous. "You got lost? You knew exactly what you were doing, Michael. You didn't get lost. You made choices. And now those choices are destroying everything." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice strained. "I really am. I can't change what happened. But I can be here for you, Emma. I want to be here for you." The words felt hollow, as if they were coming from someone else entirely. They held no weight in the face of the chaos she was feeling inside. "I don't want you here," she snapped, her voice rising. "I want my life back. I want Jake. I want things to be normal again." Michael flinched, but he didn't leave. Instead, he sat there, watching her, as if he was trying to absorb the full extent of her pain. She hated the look on his face, guilt and sorrow, but also the faintest hint of hope. As if in his mind, there was still a possibility of things being different. But for Emma, the possibility was gone. It had slipped through her fingers the moment she had allowed herself to fall into his arms. "Please," she whispered after a moment, her voice cracking. "Just leave me alone for a while. I can't talk to you right now." Michael nodded, his lips tight with unspoken words. He stood up slowly, hesitating by the door. "I'll be outside, Emma. If you need anything at all, just call me." She didn't look at him as he left. The door clicked softly shut behind him, and she was alone. For the first time in what felt like days, she allowed herself to cry. Silent tears streamed down her face as she clutched the blanket tightly in her fists. There was no comfort, no solace to be found in this hospital room, just a deep, gnawing emptiness. She didn't know where to go from here. She didn't know how to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. All she knew was that nothing would ever be the same. Emma sat motionless in the sterile hospital bed, the weight of the silence pressing down on her. Every part of her body ached, physically from the accident, emotionally from the revelations, and mentally from the confusion that seemed to have taken root deep within her. How had it all come to this? She knew the truth now, the truth she had been avoiding for so long. But it wasn't just about the affair anymore. It wasn't just about the betrayal that she had lived through in secret, the quiet whispers in the corners of her mind. It was about her life, the life she thought she had built with Jake, the life she had thought was solid, secure, and full of love. Her husband, Jake. How could she have done this to him? The thought of his face, the one she'd seen just before the accident, the concern and fear etched in every line, made her stomach churn. She had been living in a bubble she had so carefully constructed around herself, thinking she was in control. But now it had burst, and all the pieces were scattered on the floor, beyond repair. A soft knock on the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts, and she quickly wiped her eyes, trying to regain some composure. She didn't need anyone seeing her like this. Not yet. The door creaked open, and to her surprise, it wasn't Michael who entered. It was Jake. His face was pale, eyes red from either lack of sleep or from the sheer weight of what he must have been feeling. She had always loved him for his calm demeanor, the way he could hold everything together in moments of crisis. But now, as he stood there in the doorway, it seemed like the world was crumbling around him too. "Emma," he whispered her name, stepping forward slowly, almost as if he were afraid to break the fragile peace that hung between them. He had every right to be terrified, she realized. They were standing on the precipice of something huge, something they both might never recover from. She opened her mouth to speak, but found that no words came. There was so much to say, but where could she even begin? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jake sat beside her on the edge of the bed, his hand gently resting on hers. His touch was warm, comforting, but also a painful reminder of the rift she had created between them. "I've been trying to understand," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Trying to understand how we got here. How you could do this to me. To us." Emma winced at his words, each one a dagger to her heart. She knew he was struggling, as much as she was. How could she explain the complicated mess she had made? How could she justify what she had done when there was no justification? "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words feeling empty, but necessary. "I don't even know where to begin. I've failed you, Jake. I've failed us." His hand tightened around hers, but he didn't say anything for a long time. The silence between them was heavy, laden with all the unspoken pain and confusion they both felt. She could feel his eyes on her, searching for answers in her face, but she had none to give. She didn't have the answers to explain the inexplicable. "I just don't understand, Emma," Jake said softly, his voice cracking. "Why him? Why Michael?" Her heart dropped at the mention of Michael's name. It felt like a betrayal all over again, hearing his name spoken in the same breath as Jake's. She couldn't even look at him. She turned her head, focusing on the small details in the room. The faint glow of the overhead light, the soft hum of the air conditioning. Anything to avoid facing the devastation in Jake's eyes. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "I don't know how it happened. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Jake shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. "But it did, Emma. It did happen. And now we're here." The weight of his words settled over her like a blanket of cold reality. They were here, in this hospital room, facing the aftermath of a shattered life. The life they had built together was slipping away, and she couldn't stop it. She had no idea how to fix what she had broken. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Jake's thumb gently rubbed the back of her hand, but there was no comfort in his touch now. It felt distant, strained. She couldn't bring herself to pull away, but the distance between them was more than physical. It was emotional, deep and vast, and it felt insurmountable. "Do you still love me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. She was afraid to hear the answer, but she needed to know. She needed to know if there was any chance of salvaging what was left. Jake's eyes searched hers, and for the briefest of moments, she saw a flicker of something. Love, maybe, or something like it. But it was fleeting, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. He sighed heavily, his gaze falling to the floor. "I don't know," he said finally, his words cutting through her like a knife. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Emma. I don't know if I can ever love you the way I did." Her chest tightened, and the tears she had been holding back threatened to break free again. She had broken him. She had broken everything. "I understand," she whispered, her heart sinking. "I understand if you can't forgive me. I don't deserve it." Jake was silent for a moment, his face pained. "I don't know what to do anymore," he admitted quietly. "I just don't know how we can go on after this." The truth was, neither did she. The hospital room felt colder than before, and Emma couldn't shake the lingering heaviness in the air. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the occasional beep of machines that seemed far too distant to remind her of life outside of the wreckage. Jake had left some time ago, after the conversation that felt like it had taken years off their lives. His absence in the room was palpable. His presence, once a comforting and solid thing, now felt like an echo. A faint knock at the door pulled Emma from her thoughts, and she turned toward it as it creaked open slowly. This time, it was Michael. His figure framed in the doorway was a strange comfort and a painful reminder of how everything had spiraled out of control. She couldn't remember the last time she had seen him, or maybe she just didn't want to. But here he was, standing in front of her, the man who had unknowingly caused a wreckage of his own. "Emma," Michael said quietly, his voice carrying a tone of caution, as though he feared stepping into a minefield. He stepped into the room and pulled the chair closer to her bedside, sitting down without asking. She couldn't bring herself to move. Instead, she stared at the faint outlines of her fingers, too numb to even feel the weight of her own hand. "What are you doing here?" she asked, the words almost foreign to her own mouth. She didn't know why she was asking, or why it felt important. Maybe she just wanted to hear him explain himself. Maybe she wanted him to take some of the blame. Michael's gaze softened, and he took a deep breath. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay," he said. But there was an unspoken truth in his words, a truth that lingered beneath the surface, unspoken and yet undeniable. The truth that he knew their lives, too, had been torn apart. "I'm fine," Emma replied, her voice hoarse, tired. Physically, at least. There was a long pause between them, neither of them willing to break the silence. It was as if they both feared what might spill out if they said the wrong thing. Michael's presence only seemed to magnify the pain that was already suffocating her. The unasked questions hung in the air, waiting. She looked at him, really looked at him. His face was tired too, the signs of stress visible in the lines around his eyes. But there was something else, something she hadn't seen before. Guilt. He looked at her, his mouth opening and closing as though he didn't know what to say. And then he closed his eyes. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said softly. "I shouldn't have—" "Don't," she interrupted, her voice shaking slightly. "Don't apologize. What's done is done. We can't take it back." Michael's eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw the man she had once known, before the affair, before the mess, before everything had turned upside down. He was just a man. And maybe that was the worst part. He was just as lost as she was, just as caught up in the web they had spun. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, but never quite touching. The space between them felt like an entire lifetime. "Emma, I don't know what to say. I've been thinking about what happened, and I know that I can't fix anything. I can't make it right." Tears welled up in her eyes again, and this time, she didn't fight them. They slid down her face quietly, as she struggled to grasp any sense of control in a situation that was out of her hands. "I'm not asking for things to be fixed," she whispered. "I don't know what I'm asking for anymore." Michael nodded solemnly. I think we both need to find a way forward, whether that means apart or together. But we need to heal, Emma. I'm not sure how, but we need to." She couldn't bring herself to argue. He was right. Whether it was with Jake or on her own, whether it meant leaving everything behind or starting anew, he was right. They had both made choices. The road ahead wasn't clear, but the only way to move forward was to start walking, one painful step at a time. "I need time," she said, her voice barely audible. "Time to figure out what I want, what I need. I need time to understand who I am without all of this, without the lies, without the secrets." Michael leaned back in his chair, his hands clasped together in front of him. "I get it. I want you to be okay, Emma, whatever that means. If that means we go our separate ways, then I'll respect that. I just want you to be whole again." His words, so simple and so genuine, seemed to break through the fog she had been living in. Maybe she wasn't the only one who had to rebuild. Maybe she wasn't the only one who had to come to terms with the destruction. "Thank you," she whispered, more to herself than to him. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't forgiveness. It was just acceptance. Michael stood up, and for the first time since their conversation began, he stepped closer to her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a soft gesture of care, and she didn't pull away. "I'll let you rest," he said, his voice a little softer now. "Take care of yourself, Emma, and when you're ready, I'll be here." As he walked out of the room, Emma closed her eyes, letting the weight of the moment settle around her. There were no easy answers. There was no clear path ahead. But for the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe, if only just a little. She was not sure where the road would lead, but at least now she knew that she wasn't walking it alone.